The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Arcane Wonders, game toppers, saxophone solos for days, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, and the Duchy in the Desert, Phoenix, Arizona, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board card and occasionally role-playing games. Today, Mean Duke Alex is joined by guest reviewer Dan King, the Game Boy Geek. Together, they'll review Wavelength and The Fox in the Forest Duet. Then Sean pops in to take a look at Teotihuacan in a Duke's double take. And now, The Dukes of Dice. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Alex.
And Dan King, the Game Boy Geek.
Oh, you didn't just do Dan. You had to go the whole branded everything there.
Well, they might not know who Dan is, and they might have skipped past your intro.
What? No one skips past my intro. That's the highlight of the show. That is the crown jewel. In any case, we'll get to the whole Sean thing in a second. This is episode 219, which we're calling Monochromatic Wolfgang, thanks to Joshian Gurr, who named that. You can name our episodes, or at least try to, by jumping on our Board Game Geek Guild number 2008. We'll give you the best of the rest at the end of the show. Hey, this is weird. This is weird, Dan. I'm not used to doing the Sean part in all of this.
You're doing a good job. You're hired.
You're doing an okay, Alex, which is slightly dismissive, maybe, and yeah, no, it's good. It's fine. You're kicking butt.
You mean I'm already annoying you?
You're not already annoying me. No, you're not already annoying me. In any case, so as you can tell, Sean isn't here. Sean, a little bit busy, law practice stuff, life stuff, all that sort of stuff, and it just so happens that it was perfectly timed for our annual Dan King, the Game Boy Geek episode. See, I'll do the branding too. Every reference for the rest of the show will not be Dan, it will be Dan King, the Game Boy Geek.
That sounds good.
Is that comma the Game Boy Geek? Is that dash the Game Boy Geek? What kind of pause is appropriate?
I don't know, because I almost never use my real name in my videos. So I think if you said Dan King, I don't even know if people would know that's my name.
Is it Dan or Daniel on the birth certificate?
It is actually Daniel.
Okay.
But I only get called that if I'm like in trouble. And then if I'm in really bad trouble, then it goes Daniel Justin, and then I know I am in trouble.
Okay.
Which I heard a lot when I was a kid.
Daniel, I've learned more stuff. All right, Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek. That's very long. That's going to get pretty exhausting.
Next thing you know, you're going to be asking me my social security number.
I was going to say mother's maiden name, first pets. What are some other good security questions? Anyway, Dan, how are things? How are you?
It's wonderful. We're in the golden age of board games. It's busier than ever. My garage is full. My review queue is full. We're getting ready to kick off the season with Gamma coming up, and convention season's gonna be here before you know it. It's like the lull at the end of the year is now over, and we're ready to kick it into high gear and get going again.
Now, look, Reno is what it is. I enjoyed my one trip out to Gamma. It went fine. It was I had one of the oddest meetings I had during my time in the board game industry at Gamma, where I was presented with a beautiful silk scarf. So it's there was yeah, Reno's all well and good, but yeah, convention season is almost upon I'd say you, because I'm not going to nearly as many this year. How many are you going to this year, Dan?
Right now, probably about 6.
Okay. Are you coming to Geekway?
No.
Why not?
Well, I have to. 6 is a lot of traveling for me, and I have to pick and choose what's going to be my biggest return on investment, because it's running a business, and there's not usually a lot of things that release at Geekway. And so what else is going to be there other than, obviously hanging out playing games?
I'm here. That's all that counts.
But it's like, I've got to weigh that. Like, there's not big releases, and, I probably have had the meetings I would have had with networking with things, at Gamma. And so it's one of those things where I would love to go, but not until I'm full-time, which of course I'm not full-time Game Boy Geek. It just feels like it is.
See, I just figured with the whole miniature market thing that might be a good time to network a little bit. Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, well, they might be able to, I don't know. They might bring me out if I beg them, because I know they're a big part of that.
Breaking news, Dan King hates St. Louis. That's what I've come to the conclusion
What?
on. Yeah.
No, actually, when I came to St. Louis before Gen Con 2 years ago, I spent like 3 days in St. Louis. I went to a St. Louis Cardinals game. It was awesome. I loved it.
All right. Breaking news, Dan King no longer hates St. Louis. Hey, this is a board game related podcast, so why don't we talk about board games? What have you been playing lately, Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek?
Oh, jeez. Okay. Recently I played a really fun party game. Now, last year, the party game segment was a little weaker than previous years. But this year, the first one I played, I'm like, oh. And I actually got a chance to play it last year at Gen Con, but it's coming out in March. It's from Yellow. It's in North America. It's from Yellow. It's called Stay Cool. This is a game that you're either going to absolutely love it, or you're going to absolutely hate playing it, but love watching other people play it, if that's the case, which means I think it's for everybody. In this game, it's called the multitasking game. There's a sand timer. You've got 2 minutes, and you've got one player who is bombarding you with questions that are very easy, but they're always 3 or 4 letters, and you are trying to spell them out with dice. You're trying to find the right dice, trying to spell out a 3 or 4 letter word. But at the same time as you're doing that, another player is bombarding you with very easy trivia questions which if either of these two things were just happening on their own, you'd be like, this is the silliest, easiest game I've ever played in my life. But because you are trying to multitask, which by the way is impossible to do, you actually can only really focus on one thing at a time. And this game makes you feel like that. You've got 2 easy tasks. And if you're not actively trying to finish one of the 2 questions, they can continue to bombard you with the question, and your brain just melts. And people say, I like party games that make me feel clever. Codenames makes me feel so clever. This game makes you feel so stupid, but it's so fun. It is so in the most fun way, because it makes everybody feel stupid. You're going to get laughed at. You're going to laugh at everybody else. And it is just pure fun. And it makes it even crazier is that you're under this time pressure as well, and you're trying to basically get as many things right as you can. Points are like, the points on one card multiplied by the points on the other, so it's got this cool little gamerness to it. But it goes around 3 times. Second round, you have to tell them when to flip the timer, because it's a 30-second timer, which means you got to flip it. It goes through like 4 iterations because it's a 2-minute round. And you have to tell them when to flip it. And almost always, you're going to forget to look. You're going to tell yourself 100 times before you start, okay, I got to flip the timer. And you'll just be so engrossed in trying to figure out these easy things. You'll forget, and you'll get so mad at yourself, and everyone will laugh. And then the third round, you have to tell them when to flip the timer, but you can't see the timer. And it's like, oh my gosh. This is like one of the most fun party games I've played in a long time. Stay cool. It's amazing. And if it doesn't sound like fun, buy it anyways, because you will laugh at your friends, and you'll like watching people play it.
This sounds like a fantastic con game. It sounds like one of those that people will be playing it at a con, and everyone's heads will turn and be like, what is that game that people like? It's sort of like Happy Salmon is if you play an out loud round, if you play a talking round.
But not quite as annoying to others.
Not quite as annoying. Okay. It still seems like the frantic nature of it could get to that point.
Yes, but there's just one player doing it, and they're kind of, it's not like we're all yelling and screaming and running around tables, right?
Yeah, sure.
But yes, you're on the right tip. This is going to be a great convention game, but it also plays well with small player counts. It says 3 to, I think, 7, but I've actually even played it with 2, and it still works. Just one person has to read both questions and man the timer, but it's so good. So that's Stay Cool. It's coming out in March sometime.
This sounds like my cup of tea. This very much sounds like something I should try and will want to try. When I'll be playing it Geekway alone without Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek. This is one I will have my eye on for sure. Stay cool. Very cool. I recently got a play of a game designed by Wingspan designer Elizabeth Hargrave. It is Tussie Mussy from Button Shy Games. It is, I think, the first ever Button Shy game I've played, and for folks who don't know, Button Shy games tend to come in these really small little travel packs. They're only a few cards, it's not much to it, and it's just this little pack of cards, and in this case, of flower cards. The idea of Tussie Mussy, and this is an indirect quote thought, so this may not be exactly right, but basically back in Victorian times, if you wanted to communicate a message to a lover or to someone else, you would send them flowers, and each flower in the bouquet would communicate something. So in this game, all of the flowers have a little phrase on the bottom that says something like, I love you, or you have been cruel, or you are fickle. And the game itself is fairly simple. It's basically an I cut, you choose, where you'll draw 2 cards from the deck, and you'll pick one of them to present to your opponent face up, and the other one face down. Whichever one they pick, they'll get. If they pick the one that's face down, it stays face down and becomes something called a keepsake. If they take the face up one, then they get it as part of their bouquet. So it's very, very simple, very, very straightforward. Game takes maybe 15, 20 minutes. You have some interesting scoring combos you're looking for. For instance, some cards will score for every purple card. Some will score for every pink. Some will score, if you don't have any hearts, some will score for every heart. Some will let you draw cards at the end of the round and swap out flowers. Some will want to be in your bouquet. Some will want to be in your keepsakes. But it's a small deck, but all very unique. And to add to the thematic flair of it, as you present whatever face-up card you present to your opponent, you're supposed to say the little phrase on the bottom, which is hilarious, especially if you do it in this very dramatic kind of, I love you, or you have been cruel. That kind of a thing is a blast. I can't tell you how much of a blast it is. It plays anywhere from 2 to 4. I've played it with both 2 and 3. I'm currently borrowing Jamie Stegmeier's little copy of this. Abby loves I Cut, You Choose as a mechanic, so this was one that was right up her alley. And I highly recommend Tussie Mussy for folks to check out. Nice little quick filler game, small, easy to take on the go, brilliantly done. Really, really, really enjoyed Tussie Mussy. Have you tried that one yet, Dan?
I have not. I was just looking it up as you were talking about it, and it looks like, wow, the weight is 1.09. And I was gonna say it seems pretty light, but yeah, it looks. I mean, I like light games too, so this looks like, wow. Now, if you had played it not knowing it was Elizabeth Hargrave, would you have been able to tell?
No, I have no way, absolutely not. Okay. And I think some of that is there's the sort of set collection and kind of synergies that you might see in Wingspan, maybe. But I'm really stretching it. It's just those games are on 2 different scales, and I haven't played enough of her other designs to know. So, no, it doesn't necessarily evoke Wingspan or have that kind of a feel, but I will say I enjoyed it as much. So, wow. I think that's a good thing. I really, really, really dug this one. Small, filler length, very light, as you can see from the weight rating, just because it's that very simple decision, right? Draw 2 cards. Which one am I giving to you face up? Which one's face down? And there's that interesting decision point of, okay, well, that face-up one might give me a point or 2, but there's something could be really interesting. Maybe they really wanted that keepsake as a keepsake, so maybe I'll take the hidden one. It's sort of that not Price is Right. What am I thinking of? Another daytime talk show. Let's make a deal. It's a let's make a deal kind of a door number 1 has the middle prize. What's behind door number 2? Is it better? Is it worse? I don't know. But it's hidden, and there's something very tempting about that mystery. So, yeah, that is Tussie Mussy.
That sounds like fun. I want to check that one out.
Yeah.
I recently played and reviewed Isle of Cats.
So good.
So I heard you talk about this briefly. Was it last episode?
It might have been last episode or the episode before. Yeah, somewhere recently.
I heard you talk about it, so I don't want to go into too much detail, but essentially it's a drafting game where you're drafting cards to play, and you're going to be drafting endgame goals and cards that you can use all the time, but you're really trying to get baskets to gather cats, rescue them from the island, put them on your boat in sort of Tetris-style pieces, and there's all sorts of different goals you can shoot for. You're also trying to do set collection of the different families of cats, which are different colors. It's one of those things. Drafting cards, figuring out which ones you want to play, what long-term goals you want to do. Let me go get some cats and figure out how to puzzle this together in front of me. This game has been getting a ridiculous amount of buzz on Board Game Geek, just in the industry, on Twitter, everything. I mean, it's nuts, and it's rated very highly on Board Game Geek. I enjoyed the game. I thought it was fine. But I did, if you asked me to play it, Alex, I'll gladly play it with you. It was fun. There wasn't anything I disliked about the game, but the game felt, the flow felt a little fiddly to me, where you're getting these cards. You got to figure out which ones to buy with some currency. And then you might be able to, discard some and not buy them. But then you've got other cards off to the side. So you're constantly looking at cards that you have from previous rounds. Which ones do I want to keep this round? You're looking at goals. You have all these different cards. And then you're playing some of them. Sometimes you're playing some of the goals first. And then it's your turn. Yeah, you got to go and turn order. Oh, wait, but I can play this card anytime. And the flow could have been developed a little bit further, I think. And it overstayed its welcome a little for me. The box says 60 to 90 minutes, and that's about right. With the higher 3 or 4 players, you're going to be closer to that 90-minute mark, and it felt a little long for what the game is for me. And if I'm going to play a game that's that long, that's drafting, that basically where much of those mechanisms seems like it was a derivative of Bunny Kingdom, I liked that one better because I liked the area control aspect. But even in that game, I felt like, and in Isle of Cats, I felt like the amount of goal cards you got were too many. Like there's too many. There's just too many of them going on. I don't know. So I liked it, but I didn't love it as much as most other people. And the different people that I played it with seemed to jive with the way I felt about it too. So I wasn't the only one from the groups I played it with that felt like this. But it seems like online, I am the minority in that.
I think theme helps, right? It's cats. It's not some other theme. The internet loves cats.
I love the theme. The theme's great. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think that probably helps mask some things. I agree with you that there might be a few too many lessons built into the game of those kind of goal cards that you were talking about.
Right.
I don't know. For me, though, the flow was... I like whenever you have a game like It's a Wonderful World or a game like this where so much of the calculation is done simultaneously that there isn't a ton of downtime because you're making those calculations at the same time. Right, I'm deciding for myself, am I going to pay for these cards? Am I not going to pay for these cards? What cards? How many cards am I putting down?
Yeah. That the simultaneous part was definitely a positive there. But then you also have the aspect of, I'm going to get a cat, and it has to go in a specific turn order. And this one looks like it's going to fit here, but when I put it on my board, it just doesn't do what I want. Let me see. Which other one should I get? I don't have 5 fish. I can only buy the ones from 3. So let me try to fit every one of these in different spaces. Now that I got to change what I thought I was going to do. Or the person before me got the cat I wanted, and now I really got to think it over. And now I got to puzzle together and figure out which one am I going to put where, and it really bogs down.
Interesting. I didn't, at least in my one play, and I only have one play, I didn't see a ton of that. I could see how that would happen, but at least for me, what I would do is I would pick a first choice and a second choice. And maybe even a third choice.
Yeah. But it's hard to look across the table, see a bunch of shapes, and look at your board, which is not anywhere near those shapes, and you go, that's going to fit perfect. It's just hard to do.
Maybe hard for a mere mortal like yourself. My amazing powers of spatial reasoning.
So I don't want to make it sound like I didn't like the game. It was good. It was fine.
You're just not raving like other people have been.
Right. I just think it's way too overhyped.
Okay. All right. Man, doling out the harshness. Breaking news. Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek, does not enjoy cats.
Oh, I love cats.
Nope.
I love all animals.
No, we've broken the news here. Not taking. There's no secondary report coming this time. All right.
Don't send me hate mail. Send it to Alex because he's clearly lying.
All right. Next up, I got in a play recently of Azul Summer Pavilion, and I know I am a little behind on this because I think this released in the fall, in the winter. When did you play this one, Dan?
I played it shortly after Essen, probably a week or two after Essen.
Okay.
And then I think it did get released pretty quickly after that in North America.
Well, I hadn't had a chance to play it yet because I don't know if you know this, Dan, but if you don't work in the board game industry anymore, you don't play as many board games.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially at conventions. So Azul Summer Pavilion is the third in the series. And man, oh man, I really dug this one, Dan. It has that same base core mechanic of Azul, right? That I take either all tiles of one color on a pad or all tiles of one color in the middle. In this case, tiles, I guess, is still the right word for them. They're in that what's that shape called? Is that a rhombus?
It's
like a diamond shape.
A diamond. Yeah, it's a diamond.
Diamond shape. So yeah, it's not quite a rhombus. It's a diamond shape, and when you draft these, you're going to kind of have them held back in reserve as basically currency to build onto your board. In each of the colors, there's numbers 1 through 6, And so if I have 5 blue ones, for instance, I can spend 4 of them back to the tower and then build that one on a 5 space. What's really cool about the game is if you surround certain areas or parts of your board, that will give you an ability to grab extra tiles from the middle, which really sweet. You can also, it's forgiving in the sense that you can save 4 tiles in between rounds, unlike Base Azul, where every extra little tile that you can't quite use counts against you. This one doesn't punish you so much with negative points. There are still negative points that occur, just not quite as many tied to efficiency. The in-round bonuses that you get, and objective-wise, you're trying to get the most points. You're going to do it by completing either different areas or getting all of the same number. And then I think there's a couple of other scores. Anyway, I don't know all the things offhand, but needless to say, it all clicks together. It all works really well. Even though it's not as punishing, and I thought at the start I wouldn't really like that. I enjoy some of the punishing aspects of Azul. For me, this one really worked. It really sung. You've played this one, Dan. Have you reviewed it for the channel?
I have.
Okay. Did this one get a solo, or is this or am I off base on this one too?
It did not get a Saxophone Serenade. I really did like it, though. I still like the second one, the Stained Glass of Sintra, the best. So that's the one I've kept, and I don't think I need 3 Azuls. So
no.
I kept the second one. This one I really liked. It was a close second for me for my favorite version.
Okay, so if you had to rank it, Base Azul is third for you, and then it goes this one, and then Sintra. I think for me, it may be recency bias, but I think Summer Pavilion just edges out Sintra. But I'm partly forgetting just how cool Sintra was, because I'm now remembering that little worker that runs across the top. That one's really good too. Ugh.
Yeah, after playing this one a bunch of times for the review, I went back and played them back to back, and it solidified it that I do like the second one the best. Just the creativeness of being able, and the timing of being able to go backwards and not get totally screwed with the tiles. But yeah, this one's excellent. It's really good, and I could see why many people this would be their favorite because of the long-term planning, the combo building, stuff like that.
Yeah, really nice game. So that is Azul Summer Pavilion. That's what we played. Let's head on over to the news desk.
You better leave that in too.
I hope if you
Sean,
hadn't said we better
in.
leave that in, there's a good chance that might have just been the transition. That shows you, folks, a true fan, Mr. King, because that was flawless. That was flawless, I think. Pitch perfect. It's the true musician in you coming out.
Well, I can't sing, obviously.
Yeah,
but,
no. Well, look, I can't sing either. It never stops me. So let's talk news. And instead of kind of talking about the news and happenings around the board game industry, the most important thing that's happening is that either when this episode is live or shortly after this episode is live, we're not quite sure on Kickstarter timing yet, but somewhere in that range, your newest Kickstarter, the Game Boy Geek Kickstarter, will be live on Kickstarter. Mr. King.
Yes.
Let's go back a little bit before we jump into the Kickstarter. What has this last year been like for you as a content creator?
You know, it's busy.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's fun. We're getting there's so much content out there to cover. That everyone is covering different things, which I think is cool. It's not like there's 3 big games in a year and everyone covers the same stuff. I think it's exciting because nobody can cover everything. You're going to cover what you want to cover, what you're excited about. And there's so much out there, and there's so many content creators that I enjoy watching that it's just a fun time to kind of be your own unique person. There's so many games out there you can find that you like that other people aren't covering, but there's also ones that you'll still learn from others. And it's just an exciting time to be a reviewer.
Did you? This is kind of off a little bit of a tangent, but did you? We evaluated the year last year. Do you buy what we said that 2019 was kind of a weak year?
I wouldn't say it was a weak year. I think what's happening is it feels like there's just a lot of good and maybe not as much amazing. But I think what's happening is there's just so much of it that it feels like that, where it's like, the pie's getting bigger. And I think probably the percentages of games that are amazing are probably staying the same, but because there's so many more games, that if you go and cover more games, the time you spend doing all that might feel like there's not as many. But I think statistically it's probably about the same.
Okay.
So I wouldn't call it weak. I just call it there's a lot more to cut through to find what felt easier to find before.
Got it. Let me go back even further. We've talked about this on the show before, but for folks who don't know, how did you get your start in game reviewing?
I was trying to find a real life project to test because I had recently made some videos. I didn't know what the heck I was doing for some ministries that I was working with some adoptive family stuff in the community. And everyone loved the videos I made, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And so everyone said, can you make a video? And I said, yeah, but I really kind of want to figure out how to do this. And I had recently studied photography and lighting and stuff like that. So I kind of understood that part of things, but I didn't really know how to, the editing side of things, how all that works. So I spent a good month just diving into the deep delve of shooting and editing and all that sort of stuff with the video. And I was following sort of like a certification book, like a 500-page book with a CD. It was for Final Cut Pro for the Macintosh. And when I finished, I thought, what do I do for a real project? Let me put the book down and see if I can use what I learned. And I'm staring at a bunch of games in my room, and I went, I'll just shoot a video. Let's just shoot a board game review. So I shot about 10 of them, like over a 2-week period of time. I uploaded like one a day. And after like the third one, I get a phone call or a message from Tom Vassell saying, hey, I saw your videos. Do you want to join the Dice Tower? And at that point, it was just really him and Ryan Metzler was it. And so it was at the beginning of when he started adding people. And I was a fan of his at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it'd be great. So I got on the Dice Tower for about 2.5 years. I had started a channel. I had uploaded maybe 20 videos by the time I joined the Dice Tower. So, and after about 2.5 years, I'm a very entrepreneurial person. And so I wanted to go back doing my own channel. And so I was at the Dice Tower for 2.5 years. And then went back to my own channel. So I've actually had my channel, been doing reviews. This is season 8. So this is my 8th year doing this, which seems crazy.
Nuts. Absolutely nuts. Did you think this would become as large a part of your life as it has?
No, I had no idea. Like, again, the way I kind of got into this, you might look at it as like dumb luck, kind of fell into it, but definitely was a bigger purpose. I was being prepared my whole life for this, playing games all my life as a kid, up through college, then learning all the ins and outs, being a techie engineer, figuring out all these things. When I look back on this, I realized that I really have been being prepared for this all my life. I just didn't know it until you look back, because it doesn't make sense when you're in the middle of it. And so now, my whole thing is breaking down barriers and growing relationships through board games. That's my tagline on my videos. That's why I do this, is because I've seen how relationships can grow and how barriers between people drop when you put a game in front of them, and they can begin to either start a new relationship with somebody or build upon something through games. And so that's my passion.
Why do a Kickstarter?
Well, I spend a lot of time doing this. I'm not full-time, but it's close. I have a full-time job, but I also do about 30 hours a week on my Kickstarter channel, and I would love to do this full-time. And so the Kickstarter allows me to try to raise funds in order to try to continue spending the amount of time I do on this and the energy. It allows me to help travel to all the conventions. It allows me to, I want to do this full-time, and this will help me get there, hopefully.
Are you close?
You know how Kickstarter works. The way it works is all or nothing, right?
Sure.
So you've got to put it at a goal based upon what you think you're somewhat, hopeful that you'll meet based upon past experience. So that's what the goal's set at. But it would definitely need to be quite a bit more than that for me to get to that point.
That's the hope. What are some of your favorite rewards on this time? I know you don't want to play too many favorites, but I'm curious if there's some that. First of all, I'm incredibly jealous of how many promo cards your face is on at this point. It is insane, and I'm the fact that you have a Dan King baseball highlights card will forever haunt me.
Do you have it in your deck?
I do have. Absolutely, I have it. Yeah, I think I got like
King Yaz.
5. I think I have 3 or 4 copies of that card. for some
I
reason.
I got King Flutie too in football highlights.
Yeah, well, I'm in that one too. So I'm on 2 cards if you count the fact that it's Sean Goldsmith and Alex Ramirez.
Oh yeah.
So take that.
Speaking of those 2 cards, the King Flutie one is actually coming back this year. It debuted last year, but the game didn't really come out to this year, so we're putting that one in there again this year.
Got it.
But my favorite promos, I actually try not to put myself on too many cards anymore. Like, it was fun when I first started doing this, but at this point, like, I think there's enough of those out there, But it does, there's only so many promos to go around, and there's more and more content creators doing this. And so eventually everyone's going to be seeing the same sort of promos go around from other content creators and stuff. So at the same time, you kind of have to do something exclusive to set yourself apart a little bit. And plus, the fans might like it, even though if I don't really enjoy being on a lot of cards. But this year, my favorite ones that are custom are... I am on the suite of West Kingdom games. So Architects of West Kingdom, Paladins of West Kingdom, and the newest one that's launching next month on Kickstarter in March. I'm on that one too. So I'm on 3 cards there. Tiny Epic Zombies has zombified me, which looks really cool. The Game Boy Geek shirt's all ripped up, and it looks really cool. Those are probably my favorite ones, just because, I don't know, it's cool to be in like popular games like that.
Nice. Yeah, it's... The first time it happened to me, it was certainly like, this is really cool. This is a cool moment. And for it to keep happening in such different art styles in different ways, that's super cool. So,
you know what? It's fun because I have a little poster board, like a not a shadow box, but like a poster board thing on my wall. And every year when the Kickstarter finishes, I kind of put into this thing all the ones that I'm in. And so when people that come over that never seen games before, I'm always into visualizing the hobby and such, and they walk into my studio and they see all the games and they go crazy. And then I show them the wall of the different games I've been in, and it's just fun,
Yeah, definitely. Well, that is the Dan King Season 8 Kickstarter, now live or soon to be, depending on Kickstarter's approval process, which, to give a little behind the scenes, is very annoying sometimes. Very annoying.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, you could easily just search Game Boy Geek on Kickstarter, or if you go to GameBoyGeek.com, once it launches, there'll be a splash page that will come up. You can just click there.
Very cool. Well, that'll do it for news. Let's head on over to some reviews. Sean, here at the Dukes of Dice, we always do things on time. You need a Valentine's Day episode? We'll get that to you about a week or 2 after Valentine's Day. You need a Halloween episode? I hope you like November Halloween episodes. So we tend to like running a little bit late, Sean. And good news, Game Toppers LLC has your back if you are a procrastinator like the Dukes of Dice are. Because late pledges for Game Toppers still open, Sean. Still open if you want to get on board with the ultimate gaming accessory.
Absolutely, Alex. So if you head on over to GameToppersLLC.com, you will find a link to Late Pledge Now. Do it now. Why should someone pick up a Game Topper, Alex?
Maybe you have a space like I do. A 2-bedroom, 1-bath, bottom floor of a townhouse. And look, I don't have room for an entire game room as much as I'd love to. I've taken over as much of this space as I can. But this table kind of has to stay a table. But it doesn't always have to be a table. If I want to, I can convert it into a lovely gaming table using a Game Topper. And when I'm done with it, there's room in the basement for everything to stow away nice and neat. And Abby doesn't have to get too much on my case for always taking up our entire living space with games.
So yeah, if you're interested in setting up something like that, getting a high-quality gaming experience, then head on over to GameToppersLLC.com.
Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Yes, I know, Rome wasn't built in a day. But you're still many, many days too late. Well, at least you would be for Foundations of Rome, the newest Kickstarter project from Arcane Wonders and designer Emerson Matsuuchi. That campaign is over, but you still have a chance to jump in and join if you want to be a builder that helps build up this great empire. Foundations of Rome is now available for late pledge. You can find that by going to the Kickstarter page and clicking on Late Pledge button up towards the top. That'll take you to Crowdox, where you can pledge your funds and still get a copy of this game that will not be in stores, a Kickstarter exclusive project, again, designed by Emerson Matsuuchi. So get in, don't delay, hop in now. Late pledge is still open for Foundations of Rome. That's Arcane Wonders, making strategic, competitive, and social games to enjoy with your friends. Last year, Wolfgang Warsch captured our minds with The Mind. Now he's back with some friends to try and see if you're on the same wavelength with your friends. Does this game get it right, or is it on a completely different wavelength from everything else? We'll tell you. Wavelength by Wolfgang Warsch and co-designed with the folks from Monikers, Justin Vickers, Alex Haig, with art from Nan Na Voss and Sophie Hannibal. I don't know the publisher offhand. I am very unprepared. Dan King is going to look it up because he's much more prepared than me. But let's talk about the mechanics of Wavelength, and I'm sure Dan will jump in with something here in a second. Wavelength is a game where you are trying to, get on the same wavelength. There is going to be a clue each round with a kind of two extremes. So it could be cool versus uncool, or it could be likely to live to 100, unlikely to live to 100. Most like a sandwich, least like a sandwich. The variety of different prompts in here is pretty significant. What's then going to happen is there's one player who is a clue giver or a psychic, as they're called, and they're going to see where on this wheel where a spectrum is that shows where between those two things. So if it's between cold and hot, if it was way to the left, that would mean you'd want something that's mostly cold, but not 100% completely cold. If it was to the right, you'd want something that was more hot. And if it's somewhere in between, you want something that's lukewarm. For instance, if it was right in the middle, you might say, as a clue, pool water. And that's the whole key to this game, is coming up with an interesting, engaging clue that's going to help your team put their guess exactly where you intended to be. So what's something that's 25% hot? What's something that's 70% hot? What's something that it just, the number of clues and the nuance that you have to have in giving them is pretty significant in this game. Once your team places their guess, the other team is going to guess whether it's to the left or to the right. If they're correct, they'll get a point. If your team will get a number of points depending on how close to the actual answer their guess was. You'll keep playing until one team has enough points to win. That is Wavelength in a nutshell. Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek, do we have a publisher on Wavelength?
It was Palm Court, which isn't one that might ring a bell, but I believe they also published Monikers.
Okay.
But it's not a publisher that you might, just off the top of your head remember when you play the game. So it's no fault at you, Alex.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Goldsmith from the Dukes of Dice.
I'll give you my middle name because that seems only fair. It's Alex Jason Goldsmith. And it's not Alexander on my birth certificate. It's not Alexander. It is just Alex.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump into this. And for folks who couldn't tell, it is very weird for me to intro and explain a game because this is Sean territory. So apologies for the choppiness. Anyway, Dan, you have reviewed this game and the next one we'll be talking about for the channel. Prior to playing it, what were your expectations for this game?
I read the description of how this game was played. I looked at what it looked like, that you're actually like trying to dial in a wavelength. I'm an electrical engineer, so dialing in wavelengths is something I've done in my career. And I loved the idea of that. And when you just read what the game's about, you go, oh, this is going to be one of those cool, creative party games. Wolfgang Warsch is a co-designer. So I was like, this is going to be something huge. Those are my expectations. I was like, this is going to be one of those ones that we're talking about years from now.
Yeah. My expectations were also huge. In fact, so huge that I backed this game when it was on Kickstarter. Primarily because it's Wolfgang Warsch. I have loved just about everything he's put out. There are kind of different categories of games from Wolfgang Warsch, and this seemed much closer to the Mind category. And given how much I loved the Mind, and still love the Mind, it only seemed fitting that Wavelength was going to be one that was going to be a great hit, something to break out. It had cool looking components. Everything just looked very much on point. So my expectations very high going in for this. Let's do a very quick section here. Dan, how was the rulebook?
It was fine. I mean, it's a very easy party game. I learned it fine from the rulebook. I think they gave good examples of the cleverness that you could play. They talked about the different ways of playing, competitive and cooperative. It was fine. It didn't detract or add to the game. It did what a rulebook should. It gives you the rules and it gets out of the way.
Yep. And this is one that for a game that's this simple it's hard to really just hang your hat on. Oh, okay. Wow, they did a great job. This is a real plus for the game. It's a rule book. It for a game with maybe 2 or 3 rules. It's not a very complicated game, but certainly you're right. It doesn't make it hard to learn the game. It's fairly easy to learn the game, in fact. So plus to that, but it's not something where the game's going to live or die. So let's talk art and components. This game box to me, Dan, is one of the most gorgeous game boxes I think I've ever seen.
You mean the outside cover?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I love how that thing looks. Love, love, love. And maybe it's the abstract art tastes. Maybe I don't know, but I think it looks stunning. I'm curious how well it'll do in retail just based on that appearance. But yeah, the box cover to me, fantastic, beautiful, gorgeous, love it. Rest of the art, there isn't really necessarily a ton. The big centerpiece of the game is the fact that the game itself, the game box itself, is the entire game. You don't really unpack stuff from it. Everything can kind of live in the box, and you can play the game that way. So there's this giant wheel type thing, best way I can describe it, and there's a little screen that covers up a viewing window. The wheel itself is double-sided, has 2 wedges, so no matter how you spin it, there will almost always be at least some of the wedge visible in that viewing window. There's a little slot built into the insert where the cards go. There's little slots for the score trackers built in. And there's space to store everything else. It all lives very nicely. It props up and sits beautifully in that box. And for the most part, I think their attempts at having something that was self-contained in that setup worked really well. What did you think about the art and components, Dan?
Art didn't take away or add to it for me. It was fine. It's clean looking, the graphic design and such, that's good. But I did like the way that you kind of play it in the box. It helps you keep the score there. The whole way that the wheel basically is the game, is part of the box. Like that, I liked that because it has that table presence. So I liked it. It looked cool. It'll bring people to the table for sure.
I have 2, maybe 3 little complaints, little ones. One is, at least in my early plays of this, it was hard not to bump the wheel. Having that wheel stay in the same spot is really key to the game. That being said, what they went on Twitter and clarified is that you're supposed to kind of flick it up. You're not supposed to kind of hold the wheel and then yank that thing. It's supposed to be loose enough that you can kind of tip the screen up. Mine, when it came from manufacturing, was just a little bit tight, so it doesn't quite do that as easily as I think was intended. But with enough kind of rubbing and use, I have a feeling it'll be just fine as it goes. And even now, it's working much better than it was. But that was something that did mess up a couple rounds. Did you run into that?
Yeah, I actually had a problem. I was the first person to review this, and I had a problem where when I was lifting that little bar up so that you could reveal,
right,
it would move.
Yeah,
it would move it, which would ruin the entire. It would move it a little bit. And I showed it in the review, and I said, "This is not. I mean, this ruins the game sometimes. But if you kind of pull it towards you and then open it, it doesn't like catch the what's behind it and move it." And so I figured out a way around it. But when people were doing it, like, okay, pull it towards you, now open it, And Wolfgang Warsh actually reached out to me after my review went live. He says, that's not supposed to happen. We did not see this problem. I think you have a defective one. It's unfortunate that the first review for this shows this, but it's not normal. And I said, okay, well, if that's not normal, it was just a defective one. I get it. So I didn't want to totally clobber it for that. But if it does happen to you, this is how to get around it.
Yeah, I didn't have that issue exactly. The issue that came about was more in trying to like hold it to pull the thing up and reveal the window, sometimes you would bump the wheel or move the wheel.
Oh, I
that
see.
way.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wouldn't catch. I never had that issue. That sounds
Yeah.
bad. That sounds really bad.
Right.
Yeah, I could totally get how that would be awful. Bummer. Ugh. The other two things I have is I have played this several times, and mostly in kind of party settings. It is, after all, more of a party game. The card text, if that card text was bigger, bolder, easier to see from a distance, it would make it easier to just set the game on a table and then have people play with what that is. But as it would be, because of the size of the text, there would be a lot of people who'd be like, "Oh, bring that over to me," or "Let me take a closer look. What was that again?" And it isn't as clear as I probably wanted it to be. I think bigger text or even bigger cards might have done the trick there. That's something I ran into. And then the other thing is the little peg holes for scoring, and for the whose turn it is kind of thing. Those didn't really fill the insert as well as I wanted to. They're kind of a little bit loose, and it works, but it doesn't feel super satisfying to me. But none of that, again, other than, say, the wheel issue and the text size really gets that much in the way of a game. They're just little things that keep it from being as over-the-top amazing of an experience as it could be. So, anyway, art and components. Anything else you had on that one, Dan?
No, I didn't have as big a problem with the card size of the text and stuff, but the things fitting in there, they were a little loose, but it could have been better, but it in the end, it's whether I want to bring the game out or not. And that's not going to weigh it too much for me either way.
Yeah. I have bad eyes, so for the record, I tend to want text size to be larger in general on games.
Right.
So that's just me. Let's talk gameplay, because that is really where this game rises and falls. And we'll talk about guild thoughts in a bit, but a lot of the comparisons that folks made were to code names. Dan, did this one strike you as Codenames-esque or Codenames-ish?
I was hoping it was going to, and at times it did, and at times it didn't. At times this game did exactly what I hoped it was going to do, but at times it fell flat. And so it's because it is such a creative thing, you're basically trying to get into somebody else's head. And especially if you don't know the person so well, it's kind of a stab in the dark sometimes. But it also has some extremely huge explosions if you get it right on the floor and everyone's on the same page and lots of high-fiving going on. It's like, wow, like you can have really good experiences with this game, but I've also seen it fall flat as well.
Part of what I love about this game and The Mind are those high-five moments, are those moments of, how did we pull that off? How did you get that exactly right? How did you pick up what I was laying down? High five. And the fact that it can engender those is really good. It doesn't engender quite as many of them as The Mind does, but it does encourage more creative thinking than The Mind does. It's sort of somewhere between the two. It's not quite as puzzly as something like Codenames, and it's not quite as intuitive, in sync with people as The Mind is. So it kind of straddles the line in between, and sometimes it works really well, and sometimes, I would agree with you. Not every play experience I had of this was mind-blowing or over the top. I would often find, actually, Dan, in a lot of cases, I wouldn't necessarily play the game, but I had a lot of fun curating the game. I had a lot of fun picking out, okay, this will be a fun card for this next one, or ooh, this will be an interesting one. I think if you shuffle and deal those cards out randomly, I think it could be fine. But I know there's one, for instance, and this may be a Kickstarter card, it may be in the base game, I'm not sure, but it's unsexy Pokemon, sexy Pokemon, which, as a Pokemon fan, I love. I'd have a field day with that one. That one's hilarious to me. That being said, not everyone knows Pokemon. A lot of the crowds I was playing this with weren't really that chock full of nerds. So coming up with a clue or picking up the wavelength of a clue, so to speak, would have been pretty difficult. So I think doing a shuffle and a blind draw is probably going to leave you with a bunch over the course of a game where you're going to be like, I don't know if I want to play that one out.
Yeah, not only that, but it's hard. And sometimes you can draw a card, and they usually, the rules say that there's like there's a card that's, one side of the card is going to be more normal, and the other side of the card is going to be weird, I think is the word they use in the rule book or something like that. And it's true that, like, one side seems different than the other. But also I've found that sometimes I'll draw a card and I'll be like, and you'll just sit there and try to think of a clever clue to match where that dial is. And sometimes you'll struggle and you'll be sitting there for 3 or more minutes trying. I was like, I'm just struggling with this. But I think if you could draw like 2 or 3 cards and pick one of them and shuffle the rest back in, like, I think that would have stopped that. And if I were to have kept this game, that's probably the way I would have house ruled it. I'm not big on house rules, but if a game is a party game and everything about the game is good, but there's one little tweak that I think will make the game go over better, party games I'm much more likely to do that with. And that's probably what I would do here.
Fair enough. The big question that always comes up with these kind of code-namesy party games with some thinking to them is downtime. One of the things that has codenames not be quite as much of a classic, certainly base codenames anyway, compared to some other types of... Codenames is held in such high esteem. There have been so many editions of it. It's one that caught fire, and caught fire for a reason. It sort of has a thinkiness to it, but also has that easy entry point. What Codenames has that I don't like is a lot of downtime. There's only one person actively thinking of a clue, and then their team dealing with a clue, and maybe kind of thinking about the implications of what that clue might mean for what their words are or aren't. But there's a lot of cases where people can lose focus or start talking to each other and disrupt the flow of the game because it's taking the other person a while to come up with a clue. Now, it can take a while to come up with a clue because coming up with a good clue is hard. It's not super easy. It's not super fast in most cases. So I don't know if this one really solves that. What I do like, though, is that when the clue does come, it does lead to a lot of fun conversations, and the other team usually can't help but join in on those conversations. It'll happen sometimes in Codenames, too, where you'll have that bit of crosstalk. Sometimes it's kind of more nefarious, trying to steer someone towards what you think is the wrong answer as opposed to the right answer. In this one, how it's used, it's more engaging than that. It's more fun. It's more funny. There were a lot of laugh out loud kind of moments when this game is at its best, when this game works. But if you're at a party where people get easily distracted or are sort of just casually playing, it may have a harder time holding people's attention than you'd want that kind of a game to have. And I think it just doesn't really do enough to fix the downtime issue. It tries to have that little bit of scoring, right, where the other team can pick, is it left, is it right? And there's that little mini debate. But that one point it's enough for people to focus, but it's not enough to reel in the downtime for me of something like this. Did you feel similarly, Dan?
Sometimes it can happen. Like I said, like sometimes even I was stuck and I'm like, sorry guys, like I'm having a really hard time coming up with this clue. And so that can happen. The bigger problem I had is just that sometimes, again, sometimes it'd be great, other times it wouldn't. But you mentioned scoring there, and I thought that I like the catch-up mechanic here, where I think it's like if a team is down by 3 or more points and they get a perfect 4, they can go again.
Oh, and I wasn't aware of that rule. Oops. And
I liked that because if someone's being destroyed, they can still come back and win if they get a bunch of perfect ones. And I thought that was cool. And speaking of the competitiveness of this, if I was playing with 4 or less people or 5 or less people, I would always play this game using the cooperative rules because that seemed more fun. Because when you give a clue, part of the fun of this is, like you said, the discussions that come up. And if you don't have at least 2 other players that you're giving a clue from, which would mean 6 players for a two-team game. So if you don't have 6 players, I recommend playing this cooperatively. Otherwise, if there's at least 2 players on your team that are going to be talking about it, that's where the fun of this game lies, is listening to them.
Yeah, for sure. And listening to them and kind of like Mysterium, squirming a little and being like, oh, I didn't mean it that way, or oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
It does have that aspect, which is fun. But that brings up to one of the other negatives, actually, that you just mentioned, is that sometimes that's hard to keep the straight face. But what I found the bigger problem with is they say when you open the dial and you're looking at it for the first time, always open it all the way, because if you shut it too soon, they know that generally where it might be. But even when you're opening it up, your eyes naturally gravitate to where it is. And there's going to be, and it's a party game, people, please, come on. But sometimes just not even trying to cheat or whatever, you might just notice where their eyes went and you'll have an idea of where that range is. So it's almost like when that would happen, we would just say, okay, just take it in the other room and open up and look at it. You know what I mean? Because like you can give clues away by accident. You don't even know you're doing it. Your eyes just will naturally, I mean, the whole thing is white. You open it up and there's a little band that's all these colors. Your eyes will just naturally go there. So we had a little problem with that.
Here's a question. If this had been done instead of without the wheel, right, that big centerpiece component of this game, but with a deck of cards, and the cards randomly had a percentage between 1% and 100%, and you dealt out a card, and that card had a number on it, and you just looked at the card, saw what it was, and then it had points based on the range, and so your team would say, 32% or 33% or something like that. Kind of,
yeah.
Would that have worked better?
Mechanically, the game would work the same. Experience-wise, I think it would not be nearly as fun. The reveal of revealing that thing and seeing where it is
great.
The best part of the game.
Yeah.
Other than the discussion.
So I will say, is Illusion a Wolfgang Warsh game too?
Yes, it is.
They use that in Illusion, and it works actually pretty well though with that version of the reveal of the card flipping over. So I think it actually could work just fine. Anyway,
right.
I don't know. It certainly would not have the table presence and the splashiness, so I don't think it's the solution, but it certainly would fix that one particular issue. Because I in at least one game there was that issue where someone was looking and it was obvious where they were looking and their clue lined up with it. So it's not intentional, but it's certainly possible. So in any case, let's talk theme very, 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 very quickly because it's not really trying to be thematic. I don't know. It's not the kind of game that you make this judgment assessment for. So we're going to skip this. Skipping it. I'm skipping it. Executive decision. Let's go to Guild Thoughts.
Actually, it does feel thematic.
Does it feel thematic to you?
I feel like I'm trying to open a safe. I'm trying to, instead of listening, you're moving this dial and you're trying to literally figure out where is the wavelength. I mean, and again, I do this in my career, so if it is very thematic in that point.
Okay. Well,
I thought it was cool.
Look, not being an electrical engineer, it did not connect with me on that specific level. So, yeah. Let's move on to Guild Thoughts. John Cano says, really been enjoying Wavelength recently. It does seem to suffer from the same downtime problem that Codenames has, though. Oftentimes the psychic will overthink it and take far too long to come up with a clue, but once you get through that, the rest is gold.
Brett Mowers says, I've recently gotten the opportunity to experience Wavelength and think it's another hit for Mr. Warsh. It seems like it could be quite dependable on the group you play with, as it has potential to get personal, but I really like that. We found that the game led to just as much debate as actual playtime, which we all enjoyed. The components are great, and spinning the dial is very satisfying. A 5 for me.
Eugene Chavez says, Wavelength immediately struck me as a much more interpersonal Codenames. Probably more opportunity to get some really cool moments that you'll talk about later, but also quite dependent on having an invested group of players. And I would agree with that. When I played this game with gamers who were dialed in and thinking about winning, and the debates were much more interesting and robust, they could still be fun with non-gamers, but I certainly had my better experiences with the more gamery crowd, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I had the same experience as well, actually.
Yeah.
Don Gilstrap says, Wavelength is great and has more interesting tension to it than most party games. It's also that rare party game where the scoring rules actually make the game more engaging. You can certainly throw out the scoring, but does give the non-active team something to do every turn.
And certainly that's, compared to something like Codenames, I do think that little bit of, we actually have a decision to make as a team and a little bit of debate to make, especially about their guess, I think is well done and an interesting little thing to throw in there. All right, that being said, it is time for final thoughts and rating. Dan, you are going first on this one. Where do you fall on this one, keeping in mind that we rate all things at the Dukes of Dice on a 6-point scale, 1 being bad, bad, so bad, very bad, 6 being an all-time favorite that is a contender for the top 10?
You're going to hate me, Alex.
I'm not going to hate you, because I heard you got rid of it.
Sean's going to hate me.
Are you going to give a half score?
Oh, yes.
Oh, Sean hates you. I don't care about that.
Okay. Sorry, Sean. Well, let's do this. A 3 is a game's okay, not exciting, we'll play in the right situation. I think the game is okay, it can be very exciting, and we'll play in the right situation. So it's a little bit of that. 4 is a good game worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the Duchy. Well, I didn't give it a Saxophone Serenade, it did not stay in my gaming library, so I can't quite give it a 4, but 3 says it's not exciting, but this game does have many exciting times. So I'm either going to remove the not exciting from your description for a 3, or I'm going to give it a 3.5. I'll let Sean decide.
Based on what I heard you talking about, it sounds like it's what we'd call a high 3, which is also basically like saying a 3.5. So
right, it's the same thing. So
yeah, maybe a 3.4 if we really want to get granular with it.
A high 3 for me, Alex.
Yeah. So look, so for this one, expectations may be part of it. The fact that it looked so good and it's a Wolfgang Warsch game, and oh man, and this is one Abby's enjoyed. This is one that her friends have enjoyed. It's proven popular. I just don't love it as much as it's had the popularity. I don't know. I'm getting scrambled here, but it just isn't quite at that high of a level. It's no lower than a 4. I'm not getting rid of it. It's staying in my collection. It has plenty of uses. It's versatile. It all fits in one box. It's gorgeous, as I mentioned. But there's some little things. There's some little quibbles that hold it back. And some games of this are better than others. It's uneven. So it's maybe a slightly higher 4 than a 4, but it's a 4 nonetheless. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time. Belongs in the Duchy. Yeah, it doesn't quite rise to a 5, which would be a great game. We'll rarely turn out a play of it. For me, this is much closer to a 4 than to a 5, just based on excitement level, which is a bummer. I had higher hopes for this than it actually delivered on. It's not bad by any means. It just doesn't quite hit those same highs. So that's our review of Wavelength, but we're not done yet. This week, we're also taking a look at a game that is a friendlier version of a strange twist on trick-taking, a 2-player trick-taking game that's also cooperative. We're talking Fox in the Forest Duet. The Fox in the Forest Duet, which I'm always tempted to say the Fox and the Forest for some reason, but it's not, it's in the forest, is published by Renegade Games. That one I know. No designer listed. It's listed as Foxtrot Studios. I know a little bit of the backstory of this. I'm not going to get into it, but there's no designer credited. Artist Adrienne Izell, Jason D. Kingsley, Roanna Perros, and John Schulters. In Fox in the Forest Duet, unlike Fox in the Forest just base game, where you are competing against someone, you will play tricks, and you're trying to win more than your opponent, but not too many. If you win, I think, 9 in that game, then you are greedy and you get no points and your opponent gets all 7 of that round's points. If you win 8, you get 7 points and your opponent gets just 1 for the number of tricks they had. In that case, they get 1 point for 5, so on and so forth. This takes that whole scoring system out of the mix. What Fox in the Forest Duet does is it sets a board in front of you that's the forest, and you start the game with some amount of gems. The number of gems out on the board will depend on your preferred difficulty. And what you're going to do is you're going to play a trick. Much like in a trick-taking game, I'm going to lead with one of the 3 suits. You are then going to follow that suit if you have it, or play off and do something else if you don't have that suit. We're then going to look at, whoever won the trick, we're going to look at the number of paw prints in the top left corner on that card, and that's going to determine how far our little person moves. Wherever that person stops, you're going to remove a gem from that space if there is one. If that person moves off the edge of the board, that's bad. You're going to add a little forest marker to shorten the path and kind of shorten the wiggle room you have over the course of the game, and possibly get you closer to one of the game end lose conditions. Your objective is to wipe all of those gems off the board. If you can get all the gems off the board, great. If not, you lose. In between rounds, you'll add more gems onto the board and shorten the forest path, making things more tense, making it even tighter. The cards have special abilities that will let you mitigate and help figure out different aspects of the path. So, for instance, there's one that says the winner of the trick can determine which direction the marker moves, or the winner of the trick can choose to ignore one of these movement cards, making the movement less extreme. Or this one lets you switch out what the trump card is. I think it's called the decree card in the game. Switch that card out and determine what's the new decree card. Or this one says we trade a card between the two of us. They're all new powers. In Fox in the Forest itself, the odd cards had powers. In this one, they also have powers. They're just a completely different set that best fits this game. That's, I think, the game in a nutshell. You're going to get a certain score if you can win before the end of it. If you can't get all the gems cleared by the end of 3 rounds, you lose. If you do get all the gems cleared before the end of 3 rounds, you win. Your score is determined by how early you did that and what difficulty level you were on. Anything I'm missing here, Dan? I think I got it all.
No. Yeah, that sounds it.
All right, very cool. Well, Dan, starting with you again, expectations. What did you have in mind with this game when you heard about it? And yeah.
I had huge expectations
Okay.
for this. I love trick-taking games. I loved Fox in the Forest, and I love cooperative games. So you're taking a game that I already love, in a genre I love, and you're putting it into a genre I love even more, which is cooperative games. So I was expecting for this to be amazing.
Okay.
At the time, I did not realize it was not designed by the original designer of Fox in the Forest at the expectations.
Yes. I did know that going in.
I don't like it when companies do that, by the way.
Oh, have a different designer?
Yeah, like Manhattan Project was like an amazing worker placement game. Brandon Tibbetts, it was like his only design. And then they came out with Manhattan Project, Energy Empire. Everything looks the same. I mean, it was a very different game. But it's being sold in the same world and the same thing, and it was a different designer. I did not like that game. Then they went back in the 3rd version and went back to the original designer and did the big 3-hour version of Manhattan Project, the Minutes to Midnight, and I love that one again. So it's like, if you're going to start something that's going to be a theme or a product that lives in a certain world, keep the same designer, please. Even some of the pandemics have been offshoots with other designers and stuff, and it's like, once you build that product, please, if you're listening, keep it consistent with the same designers, or at least have them as a co-designer.
Monochromatic Wolf Play Experiences did that as well while I was there, and to whatever effect. You had the first game, Champions of Midgard, which I can say now because I don't work for them anymore. Champions of Midgard, which was originally designed by, Ola Steinis. Wow, almost blanked on that. And then you had the sequel, Reavers of Midgard, which was done by J.B. Howell. And there may or may not be another game in that line, which may or may not be done by the same designer or a different designer. Cannot say, will not say. So, yeah, there's... The idea with that was to kind of give it a different feel, a different vibe, but I can also get how, with the boxes looking as similarly as those two boxes looked, and that world being the same, that the hope would be it would be the same designer or the same design team that would work on that. So, yeah, I guess that makes sense. My expectations were also fairly high. Fox in the Forest is one of the games Abby absolutely adores, loves the game, is really good at it, beats me all the time. And so this one, to add a little cooperative twist on that, we love cooperative games too. Codenames Duet is certainly a favorite of ours. That combination of that game plus cooperative, one, just like with the first one when they said 2-player trick-taking game, I said, how is that going to possibly work? And sure enough, it works great. And for this one to be 2-player trick-taking game, and now it's cooperative, how is that possibly going to work? I was very intrigued and very excited just based on its source material, its original property. Let's talk rulebook. How is this rulebook for you, Dan?
It's a very simple game. It's easy to teach. It's easy to learn. The rulebook did a good job, much like our previous review that we did. I don't think it detracted or added to the game. My only small nitpick, I'd say, is that some of the power abilities, there's little exceptions that do not happen very often, and they were part of that rule section of that card, which is fine. I just wish they would have put like exception or, something like that, so that like as you're skimming the rule book or reading through it the first time, you can kind of maybe skip those things until you get into more of the gameplay stuff. That was my only nitpick, but overall it was fine.
Yeah, I found it overall pretty fine too. There weren't issues that I really had when I had to look something up. It was fairly easy to find what I needed. It's not a super difficult game, so getting into the teach, and especially with the base knowledge of Fox in the Forest, you already know a lot of what's at play in this game. Doesn't hurt, doesn't help. Same thing as Wavelength. Same thing. Art and components. I, much like the original game, think the art is delightful. I think the iconography is crisp and clear. The cards makes sense. They're easy to see at a glance. The one complaint that Abby had in playing this is she wishes that I think the numbers, are they only on one side of the card? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, because the abilities are on the bottom.
Right, because the abilities are written on the bottom. She didn't like that. So when the cards were dealt out, that kind of moment of having to take the ones that are upside down and turn them right side up, she just wishes the numbers were all on both sides of the card so that at a fast glance, she would be able to see all of that information at once. Not a huge deal, kind of a small nitpick. That's about it. But the forest paths, the icons on there did a good job of laying out the different difficulties and what you needed to do when. Little small bits. It can be a touch fiddly at times, but not in a way that really hurt the game significantly. There was maybe one time where I bumped the board and knocked stuff out of place, and we had to kind of try and figure out where things were and in what quantities. But it's usually easy to see the information you need to during this game. So I think for the most part, it's pretty successful at what it's trying to do.
I agree. I mean, I like that they kept the same look and feel as the original. They kept that consistent, which was a big plus because the original art's amazing. I like it too. No big quibbles here. It's in a small box, so the board's kind of small and the bits are kind of small, but I mean, in this price range, when you're just dealing with a few cards and a little board, I mean, they're going to be a little bit smaller to get in that price point of the box. So I understand why they did that. So overall, I enjoyed that.
Well, and the efficiency of that too is nice, that they're able to encompass 3 different levels of difficulty on that one small double-sided board without having to do a ton of other craziness. I think that worked really well. They got a good efficiency of components in this box, which I think is nice. Let's talk gameplay, because gameplay is absolutely king. And this game has a big promise, right? 2-player trick-taking game, sequel to a classic in a sense, or a twist on a classic, because I consider Fox in the Forest now a classic for my collection. It's a twist on that. It's meant to be cooperative. Does it succeed at living up to that very high standard for you, Dan?
Yes and no. This game, it feels very similar, right? You're playing a card, you're leading, the other player has to follow suit. If they can't follow suit, they can play anything. There's a decree card which will win. There's a lot that's the same. Different abilities for the odd cards. That part feels the same. So a lot of it feels very similar. And I liked the aspect of, I mean, if it's a cooperative game, they have to have the game play against you. And I did like the aspect of, you can't talk about cards, you can't talk about strategy, you got to kind of just like feel them out and try to figure out what's the right thing to do. You kind of have to get on the same page without talking. I like cooperative games with limited communication. I like that you're trying to move around and get the different tokens, which we'll talk about in theme in just a minute. But you're trying not to go, because if you go too far down the path and you go off the path, you have to place one of those little forest tokens, and if you run out, you need to place one, you lose the game. And so, like, it's this little, almost not necessarily like a push your luck, but it's like, ooh, we're close to the end. Do I want to push them there? If I don't think I can pull this back, am I going to be able to move that thing back towards me with high cards? No, that I'm not going to go down there. So it was good. There was some things I liked about the game for sure.
It encourages balance, right? Just like the original Fox in the Forest encourages you to be just a little better than your opponent, not a million times better than your opponent. So, and better being kind of in winning, because you can be great in Fox in the Forest by losing every trick. That's an absolutely viable, really fun, interesting strategy. And it's a really nice central tension at the core of that game. And I like how that central tension manifested itself into this, that there's that tug of war. There's that, okay, we want to kind of move it more towards your side. Now we want to move it back towards me. Well, there's some gems over here. We want to scoop those up. That kind of push-pull without being able to communicate too much is really interesting. And when you make a clear mistake, right? When your partner tries to signal that, hey, I'm playing this card, so you switch the decree, and you don't pick up on that, there are definitely these big moments of like, oh, how did I miss that? Oh, I get what you're getting at now, and there is that opportunity to get a bit better. The fact that it offers the 3 different challenge levels too allows for some degree of replayability, where if you've gotten good enough for that first game, okay, you can move it up to the second difficulty level. Abby and I played this 5 or 6 times. We did not quite beat the second difficulty level. We came 1 gem away 3 different times. Heartbreaking. So it succeeds in taking that dynamic and moving it into a cooperative space and having it visually shown as a tug of war.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, for some reason, and it's hard for me to put my finger on it, Dan, I didn't quite like this one as much as Fox in the Forest.
Me too. And here's what I've thought about. Now, I went back and played Fox in the Forest back to back again. With this to kind of get a a good baseline. Fox in the Forest. There's something about that game that it has an it factor. Like it's got that X factor. When you play it, this is really good. I don't get that feeling with this, even though a lot of it's similar. For me, I think two things. There's two reasons for this. One is they have the abilities. You don't see all the cards, so you don't know exactly what it is. You're doing some deduction as to, because they give you a player aid, and you can tell what numbers will help you move that token, how many spots, down the forest, which is important information. So you can kind of deduce which cards you've seen and what might be there, but there's so many cards that aren't actually in the hands that it doesn't quite do all that for you. Like you can't puzzle it out that way, which I wish there was a little more of that. But the bigger problem I had is that after a handful of games with the same partner, this game felt very samey. I'm going to play a card, we're going to jump over there. Okay, I'm going to play a card, we're going to jump back this way. And you kind of got into this rhythm and there wasn't anything new. And I know you're supposed to take a game on its own merit and not say, you know what, well, it's not as good as this. But like recently, when a game is amazing, a cooperative trick-taking game is as amazing as The Crew, which is coming out in North America by Cosmos very soon, that some people got to play. I bought a German copy late last year, and that game is absolutely amazing.
Okay.
And when you have a recent play experience of a cooperative trick-taking game where every time you pass a challenge, you have a new game with a new challenge. The game stays the same, but how you win changes. And that was so fun and so addicting and so like, we're going to play again, we're going to play again, we're going to play again. You can't stop playing that game. And then within a month, you play this game and you just go, it's fine, but it doesn't have it.
Yeah. And I tend to agree. It doesn't have that same kind of level of, part of what made Fox in the Forest so great was that little, one, it was 2-player trick-taking. 2, it was that moment of cleverness of that. There's that moment in every hand of Fox in the Forest of when do I flip the switch?
Yep.
When do I flip the switch from winning to losing? You can kind of dance around a little bit in the early going, but then at some point you have to commit and you have to be in and you have to go for it. And it could go really badly and you could feel incredibly clever. In this one, there were more moments of me feeling stupid than there were moments of me feeling clever. Moments of and the stupidness comes out of, there's no possible way of having a good gauge or a good vibe on what's in my partner's hand. I don't know. And
I mean, as the hand goes on, you'll know, oh, they don't have any blue. They don't have any art, right? I mean, the normal stuff.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
And the abilities for me didn't seem quite as they weren't as used as cleverly. And some of them are actually pretty similar to the abilities in Fox in the Forest, but since the game's different, they didn't quite feel as clever.
Certainly, I almost never had a situation where switching a card really worked out well.
That was the one ability I almost never used in this.
Yep.
Was the decree card. Because again, you don't know what most of the times you don't know what they have. You don't know. I mean, yeah.
Well,
the abilities were.
I'm actually even talking about a different ability. I'm talking about the ability where you trade cards with your partner.
Oh, right. To exchange the card, right? Because it's just like, well, you can kind of show them what you have, and then a lot of times that player would end up, if they have it, playing another one of those, and you swap it back.
I can't tell you how many times, and Abby got furious at me over this. We would do a trade, and then later in the round we'd do a trade again, and I would give her back whatever she gave me, and not remembering that she had given me that card. And it happened within the same game 2 or 3 times. That exact thing would happen, that I would give her back whatever she gave me, forgetting that she had given it to me. It just never, it didn't feel super useful. And the decree, swapping a decree in Fox in the Forest itself is a brilliant moment, right? It's this moment of, I scoop up this card and I switch this and I pull the rug out from under you. You thought you were going to do this for the rest of the round, but now you're stuck in this, or I hope you are. And in this case, it's sort of this awkward moment of the card comes out and you're like, all right, who do I pick to change the decree? Do I pick you to have the option? Do I pick me to have the option? And then do I actually do it? And I don't know. There's a lot more room for error than for success on that one, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And unlike Wavelength, which we just talked about, which has a lot of high five moments, this has a lot more glare at your partner moments.
Right.
And that's less good. Now, the tension can be really fun, especially late game. You're trying to scoop up those last few gems. Do we have the cards? Is this going to work out? But it also feels like something you have very, very, very little control over.
Right.
So I don't know. It doesn't sing. It's successful, I think, in a sense, but it doesn't sing.
I agree. And we touched on the positives. We just touched on the negatives. And I have another negative thing, but it's about the theme. Are we ready to go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
Your fox is in a forest. You're trying to not go too far and get lost. And you're gaining tokens that are gems. And that makes no sense. And even in the rulebook, it says, as they walked through the forest, whenever they peeked under leaves of ferns or beneath the shelf of a mushroom, they would find a bright red gem. That's not what foxes are doing. They're looking for a den to stay safe. Why wouldn't they make it something more thematic like, hey, we're trying to find places to kind of hide out and stay safe, so let's make the tokens dens. No, they made them gems. That makes no sense. It pulled me out of the theme of the game, and I strongly dislike that.
What about if it had been mushrooms? Were foxes on the hunt for delicious tasting mushrooms?
Better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, gems makes no sense. It could have been anything. Why red gems?
What if
pulled me out of the theme?
What if they were foxes looking for iPod Nanos? Or AirPod Pros, I guess would be a better one these days.
This was a big negative for me. I mean, the game's abstract as it is, but if you're going to introduce a component, at least I don't know. I don't get it.
Didn't bug me at all. didn't bug me in the slightest. You have a very good point. I don't think you're wrong. It didn't bug me. I think because of the abstract nature of it, it just wasn't something that I cared that much about. But it's certainly, let's talk about theme. I wouldn't say it's a strength of the game. I wouldn't say it's a strength of the game at all. There's not a big narrative story of the forest close. I don't know. There wasn't anything I felt. That being said, I don't necessarily feel it in the Fox in the Forest itself. Although the cards with the descriptions of what you are at different levels, you're greedy here, or you're courageous here, or you're brave, or whatever else, that lent some theme to things and kind of what was happening. But it's not a big part of the game. It's not a big win or a big loss for me. So I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Guild thoughts. There's just one of them. Eugene Chavez says, Fox in the Forest Duet falls into a weird place. I think the special cards, like the original game, make it too complex for people unfamiliar with trick-taking games. For those experienced trick-takers, is there enough meat on the bone and or enough differentiation to warrant having either or both foxes? I don't know. I'm not sure. All right, let's go to final thoughts and a rating. Yeah. I'm going to jump in first on this one, Dan. I have a feeling you're still going to end up lower than me, even on this one. Because despite some of those issues, the fact that it doesn't rise to that level of Fox in the Forest, which for me, probably a 6. It is a 6. Fox in the Forest itself is a 6. This is one that, much like Wavelength to the Mind, it doesn't live up to the expectation, but it still works. And it's still one that Abby enjoys. It's still one I anticipate will play a decent amount more. It has a space in my collection. It's certainly small enough. That helps, that size of box. And beating higher and higher difficulty levels is still a challenge I want to take on. That being said, it doesn't have that same level of replayability that Fox in the Forest seems to have. It doesn't have that same kind of classic fit. It doesn't rise to those heights. I would put it at a 4, maybe the lower end of a 4, though. A good game worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the Duchy. I'm not getting rid of this anytime soon, but it's certainly not one that's going to be first of mind when I'm thinking of games to play 2-player.
All right, for me, I'm not aware of any other 2-player cooperative trick-taking games. Maybe there's some out there. I'm not aware of them. So this definitely fits a niche that's at the very least not heavily there's not a lot of games out there for this. So if you like cooperative games and you like trick taking, I'd say give it a shot. But for me, it's not one that will have me coming back to it. There's other games out there, maybe not that doesn't fit that exact niche, but similarly enough that I would go for. This is a tough one for the rating, because the 3 is game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. I'm not going to suggest this game, with as many good card games, 2-player card games that are out there, or 2-player cooperative games that are out there. This isn't going to be one that I'm going to pull off the shelf and go, hey, we got to play this one. But on the 2 says has some merit, but has significant issues. I don't think it has significant issues.
Would you play it again?
If you and I are at a convention and we're having lunch and you pull it out of your bag and you go, hey, I got this Fox with Fox 2. I want to play it. Sure, I'll play it.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pick other stuff to play.
Well, that's exactly my point. So will I play in the right situation? I would not suggest it. It's not going to be one I'm going to pull out, but if someone brought it out, I'm not going to go, oh, I hate that game, I'm not playing it. So it's a low 3 for me.
Okay. I can just hear a couple of voices on the guild, just a couple of them, just saying, unleash the 2, give in to your hate, Daniel King.
By the way, if you like 2-player trick-taking games, there is a game out there that not a lot of people know about, doesn't get a lot of buzz. It's called Claim, C-L-A-I-M, Deepwater Games brought to North America. It's designed by Scott Alms. There's Claim 1 and Claim 2. They're both base standalone games. They're both very inexpensive, but you can mix and match the factions between them. And they just came out with 3 expansions that you can mix and match with one of those other base games. If you like 2-player trick-taking games, it's more swingy than Fox in the Forest, but it's amazing if you like that style game. Anyway, I always like to talk about that game because I love it.
I haven't even heard of that game, so I'm glad you talked about it.
Go watch my reviews of Claim and the Claim expansions and Claim 2. It's a 2-player Scott Alms trick-taking game. Do I have to say more?
I mean, you don't necessarily. No, I get it. All right. Anyway, that's going to do it for our review of Fox in the Forest Duet. It's going to be a low 4 for me and a low 3 from Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek. All right, well, typically we would move on to the Duke's Double Take, but hey, I wasn't here for that episode last year because it was Teotihuacan, which I didn't get a chance to play. But luckily, Sean was generous enough with his time to chime in and tell us how that game has held up for him in the year since. Here's Sean.
Hey everybody, this is Sean checking in for my Duke's Double Take for Teotihuacan. I've actually already listened to the rest of the episode and done the editing and all that, and so far Alex and Dan have killed it. So I want to say thanks again to Dan for helping to fill in and to talk about his Kickstarter. I will have a link in the notes if you want to go check out that Kickstarter page to help support Dan. But anyway, let's talk about my double take for Teotihuacan. We reviewed this a year ago, back in episode 194, Teotihuacan. We named it that because we were also doing a double take for Clans of Caledonia at the time. And at the time, Alex did not review it, which is why he's obviously not here talking about it. I reviewed it with the help of Matthew Ward, Strawman Matthew, Grumpy Matthew. Boy, was he grumpy. And then Nick, last name withheld for security clearance reasons. So yeah, Matthew gave Teotihuacan a 3 with a huge list of people he wouldn't play it with. I went back and I listened to it. It was pretty funny. People he wouldn't play it with and conditions he wouldn't play it in. And yeah, so it was a 3. I gave it a, oh, by the way, a 3 is game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. Nick gave this game a 5, but just barely. So for Nick, a 5 is a game that he basically wants to own. So 4 is a good game worth playing, just not all the time belongs to the Duchy. 5 is something that he wants to own himself, knowing that it's in the Duchy somewhere, whether I have it or some other person in our playgroup has it or the Empire has it, whatever. 4s would be fine with that. But 5, he wanted to own it, and he said, well, if Rory would give him a discount, then he would be fine owning it, which made it a 5. And then I gave it a 6. A 6 is an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. And in fact, by the time we recorded this, or at the time we recorded this, I should say, this was my number one game of 2018. So, first question, have I played this game since we reviewed it? Yes, I did play it one time since. I have wanted to play it more. It's been kind of front of mind. Why it hasn't happened, I don't know. We can, we've had this discussion before. What I will say is that in anticipation of this double take recording, I had wanted to play it again with the brand new expansion, which I'd picked up. I own a copy of the game. I purchased a copy of the expansion. That should tell you something about how I feel about the game. And I was actually going to bring it with me to Dukes of Dice Wednesday night, this last Wednesday, and I couldn't find it. It was early in the morning. I was taking Chewy to school. By the way, I should say that Chewy is my youngest daughter. There's a thread on the guild, Boy Meets Woe, suggested that, hey, every now and then, let's just kind of mention who these people we're referring to are, which I think is a great suggestion. So yeah, Chewy is my 5-year-old daughter. And anyway, I had put her in her car seat. We're ready to go. And I was like, oh, I need to find the Teotihuacan expansion. And I went back into the game room and I could not find it. I was frantically looking for it for like 4 minutes. Don't worry, Raquel, who is my fiance, by the way, Raquel was outside watching Chewy. So it's not like I just leave my daughter in a running car and then just, whatever. But I couldn't find it. And I don't know what happened to it. It's around somewhere. And it was kind of disheartening because I was really looking forward to trying it. So yes, I do want to play this game more. I do really enjoy this. What happens though on this double take? I think I'm going to drop it to a 5. From a 6 to a 5. A 5 is a great game. Will rarely turn down a play of it. And that is certainly true. But I don't know that I can give it a 6. Looking back when we did our top 10 games of the decade, where we gave you our top game of every year of the last 10 years for 2018, there were games like Teotihuacan, obviously, that were in the running, Underwater Cities, but ultimately I gave it to Quacks of Quedlinburg, which just seems bonkers. Like when you think about a Sean game, you would definitely think Teotihuacan or Underwater Cities before you would think of Quacks of Quedlinburg. It's really just a bonkers situation. But anyway, I don't know that I can justify continuing to give Teotihuacan a 6. Now, if I had been so hungry to play this game over the last several years, or the last year, over the last year, then maybe there are definitely games that kind of fit that bill. But I can't give it a 6. I don't think it's a 6 anymore. I think it's definitely a high 5. Like I said before, it's definitely front of mind, definitely something that I am interested in playing more of and am thinking about. So hopefully I can get an opportunity maybe this coming Wednesday to play it again with the expansion. So the guild had a couple things to say about Teotihuacan. Chris K said, I only had one play of Teotihuacan, but the table was pretty divided. Some players said they'd rather play Tzolk'in while I preferred Teotihuacan. It's hard to put into words why after only one game, but I felt like Teotihuacan's actions were more varied and interesting. I liked the push-pull timing dynamic of paying cocoa versus getting cocoa, and the decision of whether or not to tie up your die in the temple spot, or whatever it's called. It was a tough trade-off. On the flip side, there were a lot of little things each player forgot, which was annoying, and the game ground to a halt when someone puzzled out where the best temple placement was. A preliminary ducal 4 for me. And yeah, I should point out that this is designed by Daniel Ticini, who's one of the co-designers of Tzolk'in, one of my favorite games of all time. And so, of course, I had high expectations for this. There are some interesting overlaps with Tzolk'in that share some of the DNA of Tzolk'in, which we talked about, although it's a very different game in a lot of different ways. Jimmy DM90 says, I definitely prefer Tzolk'in. Though they're both heavy games, Tzolk'in feels more streamlined to me, as well as feeling more creative mechanically. If someone was set on playing Teotihuacan, I'd play, but for me, it's a 3 on the ducal scale. John Cano says, still enjoying Teotihuacan and recently got to try it with the expansion for the first time. It adds a lot of interest, but I also am still enjoying Tzolk'in and I still prefer it over Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan is a game that requires a lot more mental bookwork to play than its predecessor. For almost every action one takes in the game, there is something that you need to remember to do that you'll probably forget at some point during the game. I have yet to play a game of it without someone saying, oh, whoops, I forgot to, ... and having to fix whatever important step was forgotten. And then Sylvain Lacroix says, I found Teotihuacan to be just okay. Not a bad design by any means, but I didn't have a lot of fun playing it. I largely prefer Tzolk'in, even if the two games don't compare that much. They share the same DNA. I would give it an uninspired 3 on the Ducal scale. All right, well, thanks, Guild, for those thoughts. And that's going to do it for the Duke's Double Take of Teotihuacan, or I guess the Duke Double Take. I am lowering it from a 6 to a 5, albeit a high 5. All right, let's get back to Alex and Dan.
Well, that just about wraps it up for the Dukes of Dice. But before we go, it is time for everyone's favorite part of the show, the best of the rest of the episode names. Kicking things off, the Name Father with Shades of Grey Fox, referencing the shades of gray that you'll find in Wavelength, and referencing Gray Fox, Fox in the Forest, also referencing my former employer. Nicely done, Name Father. Jimmy DM90 came in with Dynamic Duo, I think referencing the duality that you might find, the two-part review that we just had. The Dynamic Duo that is us. Daniel Justin King, the man who saved my life one time during whitewater rafting in Colorado. And also the dynamic duo of Fox in the Forest Duet, that takes two to make a thing go right. Don Gilstrap came with pronounceable ... unpronounceable. That was a fantastically clever name, referencing how easy it is to pronounce something like Wavelength or Fox in the Forest, and how hard it was, at least initially, for some gamers to pronounce Teotihuacan, which, who knows, I may still be mispronouncing, you never know. Tim Tix came with The Whole Spectrum, referencing the wide spectrum of games discussed on this episode from Teotihuacan, which is quite heavy, versus, say, Fox in the Forest Duet and Wavelength, which are quite light. Also reference the fact that Wavelength is more of a party game, you have a card game with Fox in the Forest Duet, and a true board game with Teotihuacan. And then Brett Mowers with, look, Brett, I know you were trying to get me to sing. I don't actually know what song this is coming from. I have no idea. I know the reference. I kind of get what you're getting at. I don't know the song, so I can't sing this. I tried looking it up on YouTube. I tried looking it up on Google. I don't know what this song is. I feel like I should, but I don't. His title was Foxy Brain, I'm Coming to Read Ya. If that makes sense for anyone, let us know on the Guild. It didn't make sense for me. Anyway, that's the best of the rest. Episode names. Thanks to everyone on the Guild. And thanks to you, Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek. Game Boy Geek Season 8 live on Kickstarter. Go check it out. Any last thoughts? Any last things you want to throw in there, Dan?
No, this is always an annual thing that's really fun for me. Obviously, I listen to your show a lot. And Alex, I know you pretty well. And it was sad to miss Sean this time. I like to give you crap along with him. But this time, I guess since he's gone, we should give him crap.
That's right. Take that, Sean.
Yeah, and I really missed his Dukes of Diet update. What the heck, Sean?
Oh yeah. Well, maybe that's the reason he didn't hop on this episode. It isn't.
Yeah, maybe he was intimidated.
But it could
he was
be.
intimidated that I was going to hold his feet to the fire.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. He knew that I can't hold him in check. But if Dan's here, he's in trouble. I don't know. Could be it. Anyway, thanks for joining us, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
That's going to do it for episode 219, Monochromatic Wolfgang. Until next time, this is Alex.
And Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek, apparently.
Duke you later, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on February 15th, 2020. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Arcane Wonders and Game Toppers, LLC. You can learn more about Arcane Wonders, find games at ArcaneWonders.com, and find out all you need to know at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!